Hello.
Hey there.
Happy Friday.
Oh, yay. I'm so excited.
This week felt so long.
It's very long, but mostly because I'm going on vacation next week, so I'm just ready.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm going
Totally.
camping this weekend, so I'm also ready.
Nice, nice. Good.
Hello.
Hello. My settings got all weird on Zoom.
Monica, I like that. I read that as Leah's part nay because it's flipped.
Oh wait, did I put the wrong background on?
No, it's right. I think just
Right
Zoom
now.
flips your camera and
Wait, I have one, I have two, and I can't remember. Are you seeing it in the right direction? No. Then this is the other one. Because I mirror my screen or my profile, so
I don't know if other people can see me mirrored, but I set it so I can't, so I don't have an identity crisis in the middle of a meeting.
yeah.
Like as long as I can see what I'm used to, it's fine.
Let me put something in the Slack. This is Friday. We might not get a ton of people. A lot of people called out sick. Sierra,
I
we're recording, right?
I'm not sure, but I'll hit record.
I think it is. I want to give a heads up that it is 4 billion degrees where I am in LA, and we've been getting some blackouts. So if I suddenly leave, I am not mad. I am just without power slash Wi-Fi slash air conditioning.
You're not having a tantrum and just
Yeah. You know what?
logging out.
I don't want to be here.
I'm done with this.
I did have a tantrum when we had blackouts yesterday, though. Let me tell you. I was like, oh, I'll go to the library up the street. And then I'm like, that's the same street that's having a blackout. They don't have power or Wi-Fi either. So I have to drive very far.
I forgot to hit the send on the announcement. I was dropping in Slack this morning, so it just went.
Ben, you're also in like the Pasadena-ish area, right?
Not today. No, I'm down in I live in Laguna Niguel, so I'm a little bit further south. So not quite as hot, but still cooking. We're at 80
What's
right now.
I went outside yesterday and I was like, I'm gonna take a nice walk in the sun and get some fresh air. And then I was like, it feels like it's 100 degrees. And I looked at my weather app and it was like, it's 100 degrees. And I was like,
Yeah,
yep,
you nailed it.
cool.
Yeah, I'm usually I go to Burbank a lot of times on Fridays and it's just brutal. So thankful right now that it's not as bad.
Yeah, I totally got the Moni phone call from my friend who lives in Eagle Rock yesterday morning, who was just
Oh
like,
yeah.
there's a heat wave here.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's planned rolling blackouts or it's just like everyone running their AC at the same time, but
Mm.
every time I want to cook something, I'm like, I have to do it now before I lose power, and then it just gets cold. First world problems, I suppose, but
Well, I'm gonna get us started. Kevin, I don't believe I've ever seen you in meetings or Zooms. So welcome.
Yeah.
I don't know if Kevin's been at our staff meetings or anything.
Hey Kevin.
This is my first one. Hello,
How's
hello.
it
I'm
going?
Kevin has been opting to go to line dance classes when we've had our
Hey.
staff
yeah.
meetings. So yeah,
Yes. Well, glad you could make it.
today's his last day of his internship. So
All right on.
We were very grateful for you to help out, Kevin. Thank you so much. All right. I'm gonna kick it off. Emma, since you're the only one unmuted at the moment, do you want to start?
sure. So I have some slides that I created for a more irreverent context. Haven't looked through them super thoroughly recently, but I was going to talk a little bit about networking. I'm more in like the journalism and audio industries, which are very networking dependent, and in, I guess at this point, close to 1,000 job applications. What I have ended up finding is that most of the time where I end up getting jobs is through networking and knowing a guy who knows a guy. So so this was a slideshow that I made just to kind of go. Can you still see this? Awesome. So I'm big into spreadsheets, and a little bit neurotic, and I don't necessarily recommend that everyone be this dogged about it, but something that, and I'll get into this a little bit later, like I find that organizing my connections kind of paradoxically makes it feel more human, so that I'm not spending, I think what I hate about networking, whether in person or online, is like feeling like I'm using everyone as a rung on a ladder and they're using me for the same, and it just starts to feel very transactional. So in a variety of ways, I kind of keep track of who I know, where I met them, what they know about me, and what I know about them. And this is applications, but even when I'm applying for jobs, I will note, if I go on LinkedIn, we have like mutual connections, anything like that, I'll put it in that job application. So if they get back to you, or if you reference someone in your email, you don't have to scroll through and like find who you were referencing. So I think I'll mostly start here. I try to do a lot on LinkedIn, and by that I mean connecting with people in order to take it off of LinkedIn. I think that the thing that a lot of people say about dating apps is also very true about LinkedIn. If you're spending a lot of time on that platform, you're not doing it right. And especially lately, LinkedIn is like AI posts about success, and like I'm not there to necessarily have a good LinkedIn presence. I'm there to say, here is a succinct summary of who I am professionally. Now let's get coffee, let's email. And I will go over at the end, I have like some sites that help me find this information, but I sort it by company. So if I find an interesting job or opportunity or funding opportunity, grant, what have you, at a company, I can look at this sheet and be like, oh, I know this person from the LA Times and we talked about this, and I can write up a quick email that's like, 3 months ago, we talked about this when we got coffee here, or when we saw each other at this event. And that way it shows that I know who they are. I remember who they are with a little bit of help, and you can remember what they know about you. So something that I also keep track of is, if I'm talking to someone, I do a lot of things. So I do podcast production. I also have a newsletter. If I spend an hour talking to someone about my newsletter and I reach out and say, I talked about my podcast, they're going to be like, well, it must not have been memorable enough for me to remember that. So keeping track of what people know about you and why that's relevant to what you're looking for out of that interaction has been really, really helpful. And honestly, this is not in the slides, but especially at in-person networking events, I've had a lot of success dressing the way that I do, which is to say I reached out to someone about a job and the first line of their email was, oh my gosh, the girl with the plastic baby earrings. And I was like, yes, if that's what made me stand out at a 50-person networking event, so be it. Like a lot of the things that, not just obviously in terms of wardrobe, but, being a little bit more candid in my discussions, talking about things like, are jobs getting defunded, and like my own personal hobbies and opinions. I have people in my industry remember me as like, oh, you like embroider. It's like, you don't have to keep those topics off limits, especially in overly saturated industries where everyone is networking and everyone has an award-winning this and a publication in that. Like sometimes what makes you stand out when everyone is just as qualified as you are is something completely unrelated to the professional field. And it's also my little way of just getting more people to do that. Because as much as I do want a job from you, or I want you to fund my show or be interviewed by me, I also want to know who you are as a person. And I don't want to be going through this sort of soul-sucking dance of like, well, I started work here and it taught me this. And it's like, that's what the cover letter's for. Like, you're interacting with a human person. And this is kind of what I keep in these spreadsheets. And that's something that I can just super, super easily now, as I've been going back into doing this, especially after a period of, inactivity in the job market, being able to say like, oh, this person reached out to me, like I know this name, and I can just go to this and be like, oh yeah, we met up at Podcast Movement last year and they talked to me about their interview show about cats. It's like immediately you have a connection with this person. You also remember what they told you about themselves. And this is, we've all kind of, or I assume that a lot of you have been in your industry for most of my adult life, if not more than that. So this may already be the case, but joining listservs and Google groups and Slacks, I'm in a lot of just groups and channels online because it, started out as I've had people teach me how to use certain software. And then, some guy that I met on a podcasting Google group who taught me how to use Pro Tools is now like, I'm going to his wedding in October. Like, we built this connection professionally and we got really close. And that was from something online. And then as things started getting back in person, especially in Los Angeles, like driving to a networking event that's 7 miles away is very taxing, but it is important. So I try to set a goal for myself. I like to go to 2 or 3 in-person events every week. And I actually started a newsletter a little over a year ago, kind of aggregating those events because it was something I was already doing for my own calendar. And that has helped me find these events, but it's also, I've started going to events and people are like, oh, I'm here because I read about it in your newsletter. So whether it's a newsletter or something else, like starting even just a Substack, something where you don't need a funder, you don't need, a platform that doesn't already exist, just to write things you care about. If someone wants, I don't know how relevant this is in this context, but like a work sample, you don't have to be like, oh, I haven't had anything published in the past 5 years. Like, you're just putting stuff out there on your blog or your Substack. And if it is something that builds community like that newsletter was, then you get a little bit of name recognition. You kind of become more of an authority in that space. And another big thing that I found, even, I'm 25, I'm freshly 25, like I haven't been at this or much of anything for a long time, but I'm already like, even just volunteering, especially when people ask, but I already volunteer like in those groups that you joined. If someone says, I'm looking for a program that can do this, or I'm looking for a space to record a video in LA, like, it costs you nothing to just send them a quick message and they'll remember you as the person who referred you, and then maybe they'll be able to give you resources later. So it's a lot of give and take, and often it's more give than take. And that makes me feel good because I'm helping people out. It also gives me some name recognition, and you can bounce your ideas off of other people. I think that a lot of people forget that networking is a two-way street, and that, it also feels good to be a source for people. Sometimes maybe a little bit of imposter syndrome can come in there, but I really, really like LA, for example. I've, used a lot of studios here and just very involved in like the creative and media culture. And I like to share that with people, and people benefit from that because they can find resources. And that's something that I bring, that I then don't feel bad saying like, hey, can you help me with this? Because I also provide things to those people and to that space. So these are 2 things that I really like. Hunter.io, hunter.io, it's a website, and I think they have paid plans, but the free plan has been fine for me. Basically, you can put in You can do it two ways. You can put in a company and it'll say like, here are the people who work there and what their titles are and their emails, or you can put in a person's information and see where they work. It doesn't give you anything creepily personal. It's all very, professional and boilerplate, but it can help you find who to reach out to on LinkedIn, who to send an email to. You always hear like, address your cover letter to the hiring manager, send an email to the hiring manager, don't just submit it. And when you hear about a job on Indeed or on LinkedIn, you don't necessarily know who those people are. So that has been super helpful for me. I poured it all into a spreadsheet, followed like 200 people on LinkedIn. So then if I ever end up interacting with them, it's like, oh, we already follow each other. So that has been, there's other ones out there too. This was the one that I found asked me to pay them the least number of times and allowed me to do the most for free. And then Dot, it's a physical business card. My friend bought me this a few years ago and I thought it was so hokey at first. And it's just a blank physical business card and you tap it, you hold it to the top of someone's phone and it opens a page that's kind of like if you've ever used a link tree, it's like your name, your, whatever you want to include on it. I have my LinkedIn, my website, contact info, and then some podcasts that I've produced. And you can take it out at an event and just tap it on someone's phone. And I was like, this is kind of duplicative and dumb, but it, when someone says like, can I get your info? I sort of always have this moment of, do I give them my LinkedIn? Do I give them work that I've done? Do I take their phone and follow both of my Instagrams and my LinkedIn? And this just gives them that stuff. And it also sends them an email that's like, you connected with Emma today. So they, come home, event was tiring. They wake up in the morning, they see that email and it's like, oh yeah, Emma, I'm going to actually go and follow these things now. And I think it was like $20 when I got it, and you can keep, changing the interface. I really like it. I like having a physical card to get out that also connects digitally. There's also a QR code on the back if someone has an older phone. So I really like the Dot card. I'm not sponsored, but I would love to be. And then, yeah, just kind of what I was talking about feeling human and making sure that, I've definitely fallen into the trap of every single person, especially when I'm unemployed. I think that is part of what sucks so much about it is every single time you talk to someone in your industry, you're kind of like, how much can I tell this person about myself and what I've done and what words can I use if I might be using them to find a job or using them as a reference or using them to, kind of put a good word in at this company, and keeping organized and remembering what I know about who and why. That kind of puts all of that, I file that away and I can just interact with this person in a human way. And I will say, I've gotten jobs from people I did not expect to whom I was very open and honest about what I could do in a way that I would have thought was disqualifying if I had known that was what that interaction would be. So sometimes it helps to be transparent and to say, I've done X, Y, and Z. I have no experience in this, but it seems really interesting to me. I have been very hesitant to say that before, and I think that oftentimes that kind of transparency does get you places. And then this is pretty obvious, but I, as someone whose products and portfolio are completely digital, similar to that card, I like just having a website where I can just put everything so I don't have to give links to multiple productions and all of that. And you can list it on LinkedIn, but I think having a separate landing page that's a little more like aesthetically fits in with what you do, and you can write a little bit more about yourself without having to play into the social media aspect of it, is super helpful. And I just use Wix. If you do use Wix, don't pay for it until Black Friday because you get 80% off for 3 years on Black Friday. So I have never paid more than 20% of the full Wix price for years and years. So yeah, that is pretty much it. Another thing that I'll say is I again work in kind of a lot of different spaces, and I think that recently Leah's Pantry was the first nonprofit that I've worked with, and it was really cool. I'm looking now at a lot more mission-driven kind of places, and so I've been doing more outreach and engaging myself more in adjacent industries or even completely unrelated industries, which I think is a good idea for everyone. I think people try to, I'm going to network with every single person I can in the tech field because that's what I'm in. And it's like, maybe where you find success is someone who's totally not in tech, and that's why they need to hire someone who is. So you talk to them about their passions and what they're building, and you say, oh, you're really passionate about this and you don't know how to build the back end, and I can do that, or what have you. That I think has been something I've overlooked in the past and has been really helpful to be like, and honestly, I think it's better to be able to have the skills that someone else doesn't have to do something that they're really passionate about because they have the passion and they've built, thing A and they need help on thing B, but that they are mission driven and not just doing it for a job because that is something they need and they're actively looking for. So that is all from me.
That's brilliant stuff, Emma. And I have to say, that the last piece of advice, I think Adrienne is similar in that, like, she talks to people who aren't doing what she does and then gets them to hire Liz Pantry to do the thing they need done. So that clicked for me. All right, Ellen, I know you have stuff to say on this.
Awesome. Thank you. I love that, Emma. That's so impressive. I'm so impressed with your hustle. I am super impressed with your hustle, but also kind of wanted to go after you because networking to me, I agree with your core point that networking and the sort of soft skills of letting the world know what you do and getting yourself out there. That's how I've gotten every good job I've ever had. And I spent a lot of time doing consulting and freelancing. And that helps because now I have this huge network, but like, it's the only way that's worked for me. And so it's not to say don't spend time on your LinkedIn or your cover letters or whatever. But I just really believe that 9 times out of 10, like when you see somebody who, doing a job and you're like, I want that job. How come they got that job and I don't have that job? I have more qualifications than them, or like I would be better than them or whatever. The reason they got it is because they knew somebody. And I don't mean that in like a nepotism kind of way. I mean, there was somebody who knew them well enough to envision them doing the work and envision working with them and it's succeeding. And when you're hiring, that's what you're going to go for over somebody maybe with a better resume, but a total personality unknown. You're going to go for the person that's like, I always say to myself, like, who am I willing to hear from at 6 a.m. when I'm hiring? Like this, I would be like, this person maybe doesn't have as many qualifications, but if they called me at 6 a.m. with an emergency, I know we'd be able to solve it because they're going to be real with me and we can communicate and all this stuff. And so I love what Emma has to say, but I also have a sort of counterpoint to it, which is that in the process of being yourself, in networking, it's not always going to look like the way Emma's doing it. Emma's doing it the way that suits Emma and her industry that she's trying to get into. That's not how I approach networking at all. And I think I'm pretty good at it, but that's not how I've approached it. For me, it's really about building personal relationships everywhere I go and making friends everywhere I go. I don't have spreadsheets. I don't necessarily have an elevator pitch about what I'm doing or any slick business. I mean, at any given time, I'm doing 5 different things. So I'm like, I don't even know what to tell people. What do I do? I'm kind of trying to invent an expertise here. So it's like hard to sell that. What's really important is like Emma said, they remembered that we had a funny conversation, that I was wearing orange glasses or that I have a son in the same school or whatever it is. And then maintaining that over time in like a real way. It's not about being fake. It's just about putting yourself out there and and putting yourself, I don't go to networking events. It's not really a thing in my area exactly, field. But I'm constantly talking to people about what I do and what I care about and what the last thing I've worked on, and just putting it out there. And so networking can look like what Emma's talking about. It can also look like you volunteer every Friday at a food bank, and you care about food security and advancing that, so you volunteer every Friday at a food bank. And or you find out about some cool organization that's like, oh man, I wish I could get a job there, and you volunteer there just to try it on. That's how I started working at Leah's Pantry. So it's sweet. This is a long, beautiful relationship we have. So so don't feel that you have to network the way that Emma networks, because you're not trying to achieve the same thing that she's trying to achieve. It's organic to you, but it is about putting yourself out there. The one or two things that I really wanted to share with this group were the key pieces of advice that I've been given over the years that I have never forgotten. One of them is when I got laid off in a very similar kind of structural situation when I was 25, 24. I was working for a publishing company in New York that had been a division of Macmillan, and then they decided that they didn't want to produce new content anymore. So they're just going to license the content they had. So they had to get rid of like 2/3 of us. And it took place over a couple of months. I was one of those people, and I really didn't know what direction I wanted to go in at that point. And a very good friend of mine just was like, Ellen, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to be an executive editor. And she was like, no, what do you want to do? I was like, well, I want to be an executive editor, like make books or whatever. And she's like, no. What do you want to do with your day? Like, what does that mean? You want to be an executive editor? Like, you want to boss people around? You want to be sitting in front of a computer? You want to be running in the park? Like, when you have a good day, like, what does that look like to you? Are there people? Are you by yourself? Like, what does it look like? And that I have carried with me all this time through so many situations. When I start to get this spidey sense that like something's not working here, I go back to this, what do I actually want to do with my day? And realize usually pretty quickly that where things have gone wrong is that this is not what I want to do with my time. I will give the example of the last job I had, which was, I got to another sort of juncture in my career where I was like, I want to be a program director and lead processes, big processes, and get lots of food to lots of people and have this huge impact. And that's what I wanted to do. And I got that job. And it was at UCSF. And I was like, it looked great on paper. It was exactly the thing that I wanted on my resume. And I did it. And there were things about it that I loved. But there came a point where something wasn't clicking for me. And in a really bad way. And I couldn't figure it out because it was perfect on paper. And I realized that there was a lot of internal politics in that environment, the university environment, and on my team as well. And I couldn't fix it. And it was making the day-to-day work unsustainable for me. It was not sustainable, and I hit a wall. And so I left. And of course, at the time, felt really insecure about that, making that decision, and like, oh my God, I just gave up this big paycheck and this like great sounding thing and whatever. I have since had multiple coworkers from that job reach out to me with messages saying, Ellen, that was the right thing for you to do. I'm proud of you for doing that. I envy you. I wish I could do that too. This isn't working for me either. It's a risk. It's a privilege to do that. But and when you consider what you want to do with your day, there's a lot of like kind of negotiating your own privilege in there. Like, I would love to my dream is not something I can afford to do, as a parent and all these responsibilities I have. So like I'm working towards that perfect day, but I'm not always in that perfect day. And there are periods where you have to have a 9 to 5 job, even though that's not what you want to do with your day, or the opposite, right? Make these sacrifices. But that really stuck with me. Like, it's not, forget the title, the resume, what you want it to sound like if it's not what what makes you feel good in your day and gives you gratification, you're not going to be able to do it in a sustainable way. Another key piece, I guess, I will mention, I went to graduate school for creative writing many years ago, and I took a novel writing class. And I'm not a fiction writer. So I was always saying I'm not a fiction writer because I was with these people who are amazing, that's what they did. And we had to write a novel in this class. I wrote a novel. And finally, one day, the professor stopped me and she was like, Ellen, stop. There is one difference in the world between people who are novelists and people who are not novelists. People who are novelists write novels. And you just wrote a novel. So there you go, you're a novelist. And it was a terrible novel. Nobody will ever read it. But that I carry that with me now as like, I need to be just doing it. The thing that I think I need to do with my day, I need to just do it. And sometimes that's going to work into a wonderful full-time job. That is kind of the case for me now. Makes me sad that it doesn't last, but then there's periods of time where, that's not going to be my paycheck, that thing that I feel so passionate about, but I'm still going to be doing it because ultimately, as a volunteer or as a side hustle or as a, being on a committee or board of directors advancing this, like just always be doing a little bit of that thing that is your passion, because 10 years from now, when somebody's looking at my resume and they go, oh, she was, on the steering committee for this food sovereignty group, right? They're not going to ask whether I got paid for that. They're not going to ask how much of my week was it a full-time job with benefits. They're just going to see that I was doing that. And so, I'm a nutrition content, nutrition security expert because I'm doing it, because I'm just because I'm doing it. That's it. So with that, my last point would be just to consider outside the box arrangements. Like, you may need a 9 to 5 or 9 to 7 or whatever, or 9 to 5 and a 8 to 12 or whatever. You may need all kinds of things to make your life work, and that's valid, right? But the way you pay your bills does not need to be the way you're advancing your long-term passion. So I feel like, having spent a lot of my, the beginning of my career in the previous century, before this gig landscape, like being a freelancer was not, like there was an esteem to that, or being a consultant in publishing was like actually a really big accomplishment. I got paid more as a consultant. I got treated better. I got treated as an expert. And that landscape, or the mentality around it, has changed a little bit with the gig economy, that it's seen sort of like, oh, you don't have a full-time job in that? It's like, well, there aren't full-time jobs, that many full-time jobs in the thing that I do. There just aren't. Someday I'll create one maybe, but there aren't. So, but being able to continue to do that work and get hired to do that work is what I need. So sometimes I'm freelancing, sometimes I've got a full-time job, sometimes, and I have to hang up now, like my mom's voice saying like, oh, you're gigging. I'm like, okay, there's nothing wrong with gigging. So why do I feel like she's diminishing my expertise here? she's sort of thinking in this old paradigm of like, it's not your profession if you're not doing it as your full-time job with benefits and retirement savings and all that. But that's just not the world we're in right now. And so I just stick to this as long as I keep scratching away. Well, paid opportunities, not paid opportunities, full-time jobs, not, whatever. Nobody's going to ask in 10 or 15 years whether I was paid to do this, how much. What was my contractual arrangement when I wrote the Eat Fresh mini course, first bunch of things? Nobody's going to ask that. They're just going to see that I did it. So that's what I have to say. Be real.
That's brilliant.
Yeah,
And
that
appropriate for the time.
that's so like, I think especially starting out, like, or pivoting when you have that cycle of like, well, I need the experience for the job, but I need the job for the experience, like just doing something. It doesn't matter if this is something that I was like, well, I can't, put this podcast that I produced on my resume because I wasn't paid for it. And it's like, you did it. There's no spot where it's like, what did your tax forms look like and who hired you to do this? Like, the point is that you did it. And that was such a huge, like, I wrote a lot of cover letters a couple years ago where I would write like, I aspire to, or I aim to. And it's like, yeah, but you're also actively doing it. Like, you can just say it's something you do. And so many people discount the things that they do for volunteering or the skill, like, you might not be a project manager, but like, do you lead the, food distribution at like a local food bank? Like that, like those skills are absolutely valuable. And I think so many more people need to be confident about saying the things that they do, even if it's not their job.
Thanks, guys. Laura or Ben, who wants to go next?
I can go next.
Okay.
I'm not sure where to start with that, but what you were just talking about, well, let's just say I graduated from college in 1996 with a BA in community studies and then quickly landed working in the beauty industry because I was a musician and just needed to have flexible work. And so after many years, I realized I wanted to go back to school. I was really interested in food studies, wanted to go back to school. And so I started volunteering, exactly what you were talking about, at the New York Coalition for Healthy School Food. Then I started thinking about going back to school and applied for master's programs. And the one that I wanted to go to, where I eventually did, I didn't get into. So I emailed the head of that program and used networking to get myself into that program. I went up, I was like, hey, what do I do? How do I get into this? And so when I finished there, again, I had no work experience in food and nutrition, community nutrition. And so I started volunteering at the community center across the street from where I lived and eventually created a program director position there for myself. And so I will say for me, much exactly like Ellen, I've never gotten a job that didn't involve networking, including this one. I applied for a job at Leah's Pantry. I saw in the job description I would be reporting to the director of programs. I emailed Dana. I went on the website, saw her email, emailed Dana. That's how I got an interview. I did not get that job. And then 8 months later, when I was looking for work again, I emailed her and was like, hey, are there other opportunities? And she's like, oh my God, San Francisco program manager's last day is today. Let's have a phone conversation. So the thing that I would like to share is that don't be afraid to reach out to people who you received rejections from in the past, people that you've interviewed with. I have found a lot of success just getting more information from them. Asking people how you get a job at this place or other organizations are doing similar work that might have opportunities. Obviously asking for feedback, which a lot of people will not take the time to give you after you've interviewed with somebody, but just not writing things off just because it didn't work out the first time. I, like Ellen, spend my life building relationships no matter what, because I just feel like having a larger community, both personally and professionally, is really important for my life. And so using every opportunity to build relationships and let people, yeah, ask for feedback post rejection, which hopefully people will give you, but most of the time they won't bother, which is super annoying. But what are you going to do about it? But my career counselor is my older sister who always is just like talk to everybody, email everybody, set up coffee dates. And that has just always been my strategy. And also knowing that I have to pay the bills 9 to 5, being willing to take work that's not exactly what I want to do while I figure out how to get the job that I want, which is what happened in those 8 months between my first interview with Leah's Pantry and when I started working here. I just took the 9 to 5. I continued trying to figure out like what the organizations in San Francisco were doing work that I want to do, how to make connections at those places, and I eventually landed where I wanted to be. So I am not a spreadsheet person. I'm not a LinkedIn poster person, but I am a relationship person. So there's different ways to approach this and approach networking and even to approach career changes. So it's nice that we have different perspectives in this conversation right now because different things are going to work for different people. But I will always, and part of why this week has been so hard for me is because I woke up on Tuesday morning and realized I'm going to have to conjure the energy it takes to start talking to everybody right now about any, just building more new relationships. And it takes, because I am not an extrovert and I don't want to talk to everybody all the time, but I know how to do it. And I just have to find that energy, which hopefully after being on vacation for a week next week, I will have. Because this week I do not. I'm just like, I can't do it. But a lot of it will involve emailing people that I've interviewed with before, trying to talk to people that work at organizations that I would like to work at and find out how you get a job there, even if there's not a job available right now, like what those people's path was to get into those positions. And, you know, if I have time, volunteering, showing up to things that are related to the job that I want. So that's my addition to the things that have already been said.
All right, Ben. You froze.
What?
Oh,
After those three, hello? Can you hear me? No?
you're kind of coming in and out. You want to rejoin? You got a lag. Well, in the meantime, while Ben rejoins us, I know Ben has some great stuff to share. I'm actually finding this super helpful because I've not had to do any of this just because of circumstances, and I lack all of these skills. So, I mean, I've had to do it in the course of work, but not in the course of job hunting. So this is all new for me.
Another thing that I'll say that may be pretty industry specific, but something cool about doing your own independent projects or ventures or like helping friends or close associates with it is that when you're applying to jobs in a new field, like everyone who worked on podcasts that I produced, a lot of them were friends. And sometimes my friend will be like, I'm applying to like this position that like my friend who did the music for the show was like, I'm applying for a position to score a movie and I'm not, I've never scored anything. Like, will you vouch for the fact that I've scored your podcast? And I was like, not only that, but you can make that your title, like the title of your role. I will vouch because you're closer with those people. Often your title is not clearly defined. So if you have the skills for a job and that wasn't your title and it was with someone you can probably reach out and be like, can I say this is my title? Or at the very least, like, can you vouch for this skill that I haven't done
Oh,
in a professional capacity otherwise.
Sierra, Ben is in the waiting room. I don't see the waiting room. Let's see.
Oh, sorry, I just added him.
Okay, great.
He's good.
Sorry about that. I thought I was going to escape this. My computer's not working very well. Uh, yeah, sorry, just kind of now getting back in the zone. That was awesome. I really don't know what else I can add to that because he kind of covered a lot of things. I will talk maybe just a little bit about how I navigated and some thoughts that came up when you were talking about that. Because it sounds real similar. I think Laura and I have like parallel paths because my I definitely didn't have a straight line like career trajectory. I've had multiple careers, which I think is pretty I don't know, seeing that a lot, right? Like I started as a musician, graduated a business management major, was going to take a year off to go. I got a little indie record deal with my band and have the opportunity to go tour and stuff. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do that for a year and then I'm going to move to LA and like get a real job. And then like 10 years later, I was still on the road doing stuff and it was great. But through that, it was like, talking about kind of the hustle to make things work. There wasn't all the time um, where, I got to a point, I was very, very lucky where I was able to make a living eventually through music, which is, I know, I understand very, very rare, but that was hard, hard won. It was like, I mean, everything from a barista, bartender, server, did all the things. Um, and that's only to say like, that allowed me there's so many skills that came from that and so many people I interacted. But a big pivot, I guess I wanted to talk a bit about pivots, right? Because there's kind of a big pivot going from that to like what I'm doing now, right? But it all makes sense. There is a through line. So basically I decided, after a while, like, I was running a couple businesses in tour management and media production, and record distribution. And I realized like the way the stuff was going, I if I didn't make a pivot, I was going to be on the road basically my whole life. And I really wanted a different kind of thing. I wanted to be more family. I wanted to be around for the kids, that kind of stuff. Um, so I kind of had to really struggle with at that point, like, all right, what am I good at or not good at? What skills do I have that I've kind of amassed over this time? Like, what do I want, right? To Ellen's point. And then who needs that? What's the needs of um like where can that fit? And I'm just gonna go straight through like a lot happened, right? Let me give you the quick like Cliff's notes. Most of my stuff happened in conversations. I am too, and very much an introvert. Um, I don't like the word networking. It gives me kind of creeps. I find that where I think introverts really shine that I've seen is the ability to have kind of one-on-one conversations and they tend to be curious. I know these are big blanket statements, but tend to be asking more questions than sort of promoting. Um, and that has served me. Like I thought it was a liability. It has actually served me. And it's sort of been the thing that has just kind of been how I like to operate, where instead of thinking of it a way to like network and promote and show who I am, show what I've done and all the things, it's more about like, for a corpo term, like value add, like what can I bring to the table? Like trying to figure out what it is that people want. And you guys kind of already touched on this already, like when you're having those conversations and outside of your industry, finding out what people are working on, what they need, how can you bring your specialized skill set to that thing? Um, I wound up pivoting from that kind of life into going into more of a corporate role that way, just through a conversation at a party with a friend of a friend who said, "Hey," but I'm like, "How can I use these skills that I have? Like, where does that make sense, in a job?" And turns out there was a consumer tech company that had a media arm that was happening to look for a music marketing vertical leader. And just through a friend of a friend, it made sense. It was a good fit, and I learned a ton going through that. Did the whole corporate thing, climbed the ladder, and then realized that wasn't for me. I needed something else, and I wound up doing another pivot where I decided to take those skills, got really involved in having another one of those moments of like, what is it that I'm really interested in? And what I realized what it was is like, I'm really interested in why people behave the way they do, how people learn and make decisions, how to affect behavior change, and really wanting to make an impact. So again, I didn't have a clear idea of what that looked like fully. I just knew that that was something I'm super interested in. Um, I, knew that's what I wanted to do. I knew what I could do. And then I had to kind of put those things together to figure out where that would be useful. Um, I also wanted to touch on to like there was a topic that was raised about like 2 degree or not 2 degree. I know that's a separate thing, but it works in my trajectory and also with networking. For me, I got really nerded out on this idea of designing experiences and learning and cognitive psychology, and all that was really fascinating to me. Um, so I decided to go that route and kind of leverage a lot of the skills I had. But did I need a degree to go that route professionally? I don't know. Maybe the credential looks good. For me, the decision was like I wanted to place to explore and have like a playground, have access to tech I didn't have access to really smart people who were like, wanting to figure stuff out together. That was the stuff that drove me to make that decision. Um, no regrets. Yeah, I mean, I could have done it without it, maybe, but I think that is a decision. Um, that yeah, I don't think it's something where, at least in this field, where it's like, okay, I'm going to get a degree and that's going to increase my salary. I think what it does is opens you up to a pool of people for networking that you wouldn't, and you go deep with a lot of these people. And what I found is a lot of those people in my cohort are now people I work with on different projects. They become my network. We kind of all go out into the fields, and it's really interesting. Like, it's not a straight line for me, but I'm still working with people from, you know, 20 years ago that I did a project with in a completely different industry. So I guess that's all to say. I guess I just want to leave with you don't need the permission to make pivots. Like, there's no right way to do this thing as far as I'm concerned. Maybe there is, and I just haven't figured it out, but it's worked for me. Um, uh, and and I think the biggest thing is just trying to for me, just needed to take my time. If I was to do it differently, I would say just slow down a little bit. I worked really, really hard for a really, really long time. And a lot of the times I felt like I was just banging my head against the wall. And it was not healthy and sustainable. Um, and so it wasn't until I kind of gave myself some grace, took some time, got quiet, and I understand I was very lucky to have the opportunity to do that too, right? But I think it's important to find that space and really get clear on what it is that is of interest and what it is you can do, and then try to figure out how you can be of value to other people. And if that's always worked for me as far as leading me when I'm having those conversations, and yeah, the rest of it's just details. So happy to answer any specific questions, but I'll leave it at that.
David, I know, right? That's our new business
Yeah.
arm is the band, the
Yeah.
music generation.
Yeah.
And photography, don't forget, David. We talked photography.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
I am really appreciating this because it's sort of like a different way of thinking than the moment is the moment is like right now is creating a lot of fear and like I gotta find and not lose my status and kind of keep upward trajectory, and recognizing that you're gonna have to be okay with a different, more meandering trajectory.
Monica, you're bringing to mind this little like internal dialogue that I often have when I'm going through like a transitional phase like this, where I have to remind myself this whole idea of the scarcity mindset and the abundance mindset. And I really hate like positivity culture. Say that like I'm a total salty New Englander, like there's nothing wrong with complaining and venting, like
Yeah.
it's part of life. Like, why do we have to brand things positive and negative? But I do think when you're thinking about yourself and the value that you bring to a situation, like it's so easy to, look externally at like all of the measures or paradigms or what other people are doing and compare yourself, and that you are inevitably not going to be as much as all these other people. It's inevitable, right? And so trying to internalize the abundance mindset of like the value you have that is just doesn't have a dollar sign attached to it yet, and really believing in that, and that you can continue that even if that's not what your full-time job is, or like, or if that's like, my husband's a musician, right? He has his day job and he does a great day job, but he's not tripping about whether he doesn't introduce himself as that. He's a musician, and that's where he takes his identity, because he's got that in here, that he's bringing that. And for those of us whose passion is less, I don't know, familiar than like being a musician or a ballet dancer or whatever, like my thing is very esoteric, right? I have to make this up for myself, but the scarcity mindset will kill you when you're looking for a job, because I think people smell desperation.
100%. 100%. And I will say a couple of these, this is not original thought. This is what advice was given to me, and I found it really useful. Two things was one, when you're talking to people, let's not talk about you, let's not talk about me, let's talk about something bigger, right? Just that idea of, let's get outside of like, who am I and what do you do? Whenever I hear someone ask me like, oh, so what do you do? I'm like, for money or for like, it feels like very like, I'm just kind of vetting you to see if you can do something for me, that kind of thing, you know? So I've tried to refrain from doing that. And then the other one, geez, it was a really good one and I got to think about it, but oh man, I lost it. I'll come back. I'll put it in the Slack channel. Uh, but yeah, I guess it's just more that idea of like, you don't, what you do doesn't define you at all, and just kind of, for me, it's like, what are you about? What do you want? What inspires you? What feels good, you know? And
Yeah,
there you go.
I do want to say like that was, I think, a big thing that kind of changed the way that I thought about my experience and how I framed it. Was I was with a friend of mine, and this was when I was producing podcasts and working at Trader Joe's, and she introduced me to a mutual friend, and they were like, oh, like, who is this? And she was like, this is Emma, she produces podcasts, not like, this is Emma, she works at Trader Joe's 5 days a week. And then also like the things that people know about you and the way that they present you to others and talk about you and like know about what you do is almost never what your 9 to 5 happens to be, unless you're fortunate enough for that to intersect with like your passions or your aspirations. And the only thing standing between you and being introduced to people as the thing you want to be is just doing it independently of getting a job in it, until you hopefully eventually do. But it's like, no one's gonna, if you're an artist who's also an accountant, most people are gonna be like, this is my friend Ellen, she paints, and not, this is my friend Ellen, she does people's 1099s. Like, I don't know. I just think that was like a really big thing for me when like I stood there and I was like, yeah, that is what I do. It was like a like brain melting moment on this random Tuesday.
And what's funny about, sorry, go ahead.
Good. I was just gonna say, did anybody have any questions? Nobody dropped any questions in the
Oh,
chat.
yeah.
But just want to give the last second or two for questions. Oh, yeah, Amber, thanks for putting that in. Yeah. Go ahead, say what you were gonna say, Ben. I know.
I remember the last thing.
Yeah.
And first of all, I'm going to start this by saying I'm very guilty of this. So this is not like, but the asking somebody to pick their brain, I was told, is not the move. It's back to that concept of like transactional stuff. People are really, really busy. And also the idea of picking somebody's brain feels, I think for me, what's worked is, um, asking if they have any time, and if they don't, it's totally cool. like no
And be
pressure,
specific
right?
about why you want to, like, what
was
you're
it.
coming to them for.
That's
and
it.
why
That was
them.
where I was going with it.
Oh,
100%. Be very specific about what it is, the request. I found that useful. Maybe you will. There you have it.
Thank you. Now I have to go talk to my therapist, and this is what I'm going to go talk about. So I got to go.
He'll pick your brain, or she'll
You
pick
guys
your
stay
brain.
on. I
Yeah.
need to disappear.
I also have to go. But this has been awesome.
Yeah,
This
thanks
is
everybody.
awesome. Thank you guys.
Appreciate you.
Ready?
Thank you.
I got a big smile on my face.